Support comes from Missouri Forest Products Association, committed to sustainable and sound conservation of the state's forests, which support more than 41,000 Missouri jobs, resulting in a $10 billion industry. ChooseWood.com.
From St. Louis Public Radio. This is St. Louis on the Air.
And the alderwoman, Pamela Boyd, had received so many calls about our presence, like curious as to what are these people doing here.
There's some details, there's maybe some architecture, you see maybe the brick walkway. How do you decide which photos end up representing what you guys saw that day?
It's definitely created a different impression than if I had just read about those.
I'm Sarah Fenske. 9 years ago, Jason Gray drew up a plan. He wanted to bring photographers together to document all 79 of the city's neighborhoods. He called it Photo Flood St. Louis. Now, a 9-year plan might seem pretty ambitious for a group that did not yet exist, but Jason Gray was clearly onto something. This month, Photo Flood St. Louis officially completed that 9-year plan. They shot all 79 city neighborhoods and a few regional ones to boot. And in that time, they went from one man with a dream to 610 photographers, both amateur and professional. It's quite an achievement, and it's a very cool story. And joining us today to tell it is Jason Gray. He's the founder of Photo Flood St. Louis. So, Jason, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah.
So take us back to the beginning 9 years ago. Where did the idea to flood St. Louis with photos came from?
Well, it came about after I moved back to St. Louis, having been in Chicago for about 10 years. And this time, I brought my wife with me, and I was showing her around the area, and we wound up in Grafton, Illinois, during a motorcycle parade of some sort. And I thought it'd be really fascinating to see, this event taking place from multiple angles at once. And that sort of was the gel behind Photo Flood St. Louis.
So how do you go from, we're going to shoot these motorcyclists in Grafton from different angles to, you know what, we need to hit all 79 St. Louis city neighborhoods from different angles?
Yeah, I think part of it was finding my place in the city again. So having been gone for such a long period of time, there was so much of the city that was familiar, but was also unfamiliar. And so I wanted to find where I fit in that matrix again, and sort of see some of the things I didn't know, and share that with people around the area.
So when you drew that up, when you talk about a photo flood, what does a photo flood look like?
Yeah, so a photo flood is it's a 2-hour event where we have a group of photographers go into a neighborhood, and then for 2 hours they wander around the neighborhood under no prescribed path, and photograph what they see, and talk to the people that they meet and learn about the neighborhood firsthand.
And so are these photographers who are doing this, are they typically just going off on their own? They show up at the neighborhood, they're going to shoot what they shoot. They're not necessarily hanging out buddy-buddy with the other photographers.
Right, yeah. There are groups that kind of go out together, and then there are people that walk alone. So it's a full gamut of folks that come out to the photo floods. And
so the way this ended up working out is you brought people together. I understand you started with a couple people that you knew.
Yes, that's right, yeah. So I started with 5 photographers originally, and they were all photographers that I knew. We photographed downtown St. Louis, which is probably the best place to start if you're going to photograph the city of St. Louis. And it's just grown from there.
And so you started photographing downtown. At this point, did you already have that 9-year plan drawn up of what you were going to do when?
I did, yeah.
I mean, this just seems so presumptuous. I keep getting stopped by your hubris here. Like, Who has a 9-year plan before you even get started? But you kind of wanted to do things methodically.
I did, yeah. Yeah, I saw, a potential for an organization in St. Louis that could assist photographers with networking and getting to know one another, that would have the additional capacity to, explain some of the story of St. Louis. And that's really, part of the reason why this had such a grand plan in the beginning, was that I saw an opportunity.
And were you coming in, would you consider yourself a professional photographer at that point?
Yeah. I was doing a wedding and portrait photography in Chicago, and I moved that business to St. Louis. Soon after, I started working at the St. Louis Art Museum and became the manager of their photo studio there. And it was during that time that I created this idea.
So you set out for downtown. On that first one, you only had 5. I imagine downtown's a pretty well photographed neighborhood. Did the residents even realize like they'd been flooded?
Not really. Yeah, there's hard to tell who's who's out there to photograph the neighborhood and who's just in the neighborhood.
I imagine that's been totally different with some other neighborhoods, and especially as the size of your group has grown. I mean, when you guys show up at some of these neighborhoods and there's a whole bunch of you, have people been wondering, what's up? Why are you here in my neighborhood?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. And the reaction to that runs the full scale of what you might expect. Last year, we were photographing Walnut Park East and West, and so we photographed.
And this is in North St. Louis.
In North St. Louis, yeah. So we photographed one neighborhood 1 month, and then came back and photographed the next neighborhood the next month. And the alderwoman, Pamela Boyd, had received so many calls about our presence, like curious as to what are these people doing here, taking pictures, that she came out to investigate. And we ended up having a great conversation, and I had the opportunity to interview her as part of that.
So that ended up being a very positive interaction. Have you ever showed up and you find people are like, hey, get out? Like, this isn't wanted.
Yeah, sometimes. There have been a couple of occasions where, people have yelled things as we're walking, but no real negative interactions over the 10 years roughly that we've been doing.
That's great.
So, yeah.
And I got to say, looking at these photos, and I want to encourage people to check out these photos. This is just a wonderful chronicle of the city. You can go to photofloodstl.org. If you spend just a little time browsing around the site, there's a map, and you can click on any one of these neighborhoods. And now that this project is complete, the 9-year plan has been achieved, you can click on any of them, and you can see the work that they've done. Some of my favorite images looking at this are the images of people, like just random residents of neighborhoods out and about doing their thing, in some cases even looking out of windows.
Yeah.
Do you ever have people who you can just tell they don't want to be photographed? I mean, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, we're sensitive to that. So if someone really doesn't want to be photographed, we don't take their picture. And there's usually an interaction. So most of the group isn't shooting with long telephoto lenses. People at a distance have no idea they're being photographed. In fact, most of our photographers are in the proximity of the person being photographed, and there's generally an interaction.
And after the fact, do you ever find people going, hey, I'd love to get a copy of this photo?
Sure, yeah, and we've learned things about some of the people that we photographed after the fact. Someone contacted me through social media after we posted an image of an individual that I photographed in the Hill neighborhood. And it was a relative, so I was able to learn a little bit about, what this figure did for a living and, what impact he had on the people that he loved.
So this website you've put together, it's not just the photos. You're also weaving in a narrative that includes some history of the neighborhood, gives some impressions of what it was like to be there that day. It's really some lovely writing.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, that's you doing that writing.
It is, yeah.
And was that part of the idea from the beginning?
It was, to do the writing. The writing was... there was a bit of an evolution. So when the very first photo flood, I didn't have the idea yet of writing a full history of the neighborhood. That came about after photo flood 2 or 3. I forget which one. But since then, it's been a part of the process.
And what kind of things do you draw on as you're coming up with this history? There's a lot of sources you can't trust when it comes to local history, I find.
Yeah, you try and vet sources and then, have multiple sources. So reading a lot of the various books that are out there, visiting the library, checking, some reliable websites online, that sort of thing.
So part of what I find myself wondering, looking at, again, it's photofloodstl.org, is you don't do a flood of a million photos. In these narratives, you're sort of choosing some that give a sense. There's some details. There's maybe some architecture. You see maybe the brick walkway. How do you decide which photos end up representing what you guys saw that day?
Yeah, some of our floods have over 1,000 images produced. And only 20 wind up in the associated article. So we have a judging team that consists of myself and then 2 guest judges that pick the top 20 that wind up at the actual post.
Okay. And was that necessary at the beginning to have these judges? I imagine as the group's grown, you've had to figure out some of these things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The judging component wasn't fully fleshed out at the beginning. And in fact, there's an award component to the whole activity at the end of the year. And we've partnered with different organizations around the city that provide gifts to our members as part of the award process.
And so the award is for best photo of the year, or?
So it's generally person who's won the most floods, or photo flood member favorites. So people who attend the most. So there are a few different awards.
Okay, so this is really an organized thing. Was that
Yeah.
also part of the vision from the beginning?
The award process came in the second year, so not a part of the beginning. So really, just in the beginning, it was the general concept and the full schedule of 9 years of photo floods.
I actually want to go to the phone lines. Dick is calling from the Central West End. Dick, hi, you're on St. Louis on the Air.
Thanks, and kudos to you and your colleagues for launching this effort. And it reminds me of something with which I was involved when I lived in Denver. We hosted Rick Smolin and his team at Day in the Life of America that it kind of parallels for the nation what it seems that you have been doing. Are you at all familiar with Rick's work or with Day in the Life of America?
I'm not familiar with that, but I'll definitely check it out. It sounds interesting, though.
Yeah, Dick, thank you for that call. It's interesting to hear. I feel like there's some other kind of similar projects people have done in other cities, and yet sort of the particulars of this are unique to St. Louis.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, I've since founding the organization, I've found other groups across the country that have done somewhat similar things. So I don't think anyone's gone neighborhood by neighborhood that I'm aware of yet.
We do need to take a quick break. We'll be back shortly to continue this conversation with Jason. This is St. Louis on the Air on St. Louis Public Radio. Welcome back. Our guest today is Jason Gray, the founder of Photo Flood St. Louis. After 9 years, they've completed the plan that Jason put together to photograph all 79 St. Louis neighborhoods. You can see their work at photofloodstl.org. Jason, the 79th neighborhood that you visited, that was the West End, and you did that this spring. What was it like to cross that final one off the list?
It was, it felt like a good accomplishment. It came at the end of us catching up after the break of COVID. So we were photographing more than just one a month. We were photographing 2 photo floods a month, which was a busy schedule. And so the West End was the final flood in that schedule that we had to do in the final flood of the 79 neighborhoods to complete.
And the photos that came out of that are among my favorite of the whole project. Did you have an extra number of people turn out because this was the last one?
Yeah, we had around 30 people come
Wow.
out for that one. So including some original photo flooders from the Photo Flood 1. So it was a nice kind of finish to the project in a way.
And it really wasn't the finish because then you went back to downtown. This was 9 years after this project began. Had a lot changed in that time?
Actually, a little bit, yeah. So there was a few opportunities to photograph what we had photographed before in Photo Flood 1, and it's interesting to see the effect of 9 years on those locations. And the city has grown in that time, so it's also positive to see where it's grown and where it's developed.
So that change, the change you've seen in the 9 years you're working on this project, there's a lot of debate. Is St. Louis on the upswing? Are things getting worse? Are we losing people? What are we doing? What's your sense of that after spending 9 years kind of boots on the ground?
Yeah, I think, going back to as far as I can remember in my experience in St. Louis is definitely a much better place now than it was, when I was a kid. It's more vibrant. There are more opportunities for people to express themselves. It's a more equitable city. And I definitely think we're on the right track toward where we need to be.
So many of us just never get out of the couple neighborhoods we know really well. Now you've seen all of them. Is there one you'd point to where you'd say, you know what, this neighborhood was such a pleasant surprise?
Yeah, there have been quite a few of those, actually. West End was, for instance, a surprise for many of our members who had never been to the neighborhood or knew that those homes existed.
I mean, beautiful old mansions there.
Really beautiful, yeah. North Point is another one on the far north side of St. Louis that I don't think a lot of people expect to find this kind of like quaint intact suburban style community existing on the borders of North St. Louis. And we've embraced those kind of opportunities to teach people that there are these neighborhoods and in all areas around St. Louis that you may not realize exist there.
Yeah, I mean, do you think more of us would feel that sense of positivity you feel about the city these days if we were getting out of our own backyard and maybe actually seeing all the options?
Yeah, I think so. I think the opportunity to walk around and meet people in their own neighborhoods and learn about their experiences directly from them in just outside of their homes, it's definitely created a different impression than if I had just read about those.
So you've got that. I mean, the journey has been such a wonderful thing. At the same time, you've also kind of you've reached this destination. You charted out this plan so ambitious. You finished this plan. You wrote this on your personal Facebook page. 9 years ago, we started with just 5 photographers, and today we have over 600 members. Neither of my kids have known a world without Photo Flood St. Louis. And it made me realize it's not just that you pressed on with this 9-year plan throughout COVID. You've gotten a different job during that time. You've had a family. When you look back on where you were 9 years ago, did that Jason Gray have any idea what this Jason Gray was going to go through in the course of this 9-year plan that you put together?
Yeah, I don't think so. That's he may not have created Photo Flood if that was the case. It was certainly a lot of effort to raise a family and to kind of stabilize my career and find my path in terms of my career at the same time of developing an organization with so many photographers and so many interests involved. But it was a challenge well worth taking.
You feel like it's been a net positive in your life?
Yeah, definitely. Yes. Yep.
So I got to ask that then. I mean, you finished this 9-year plan, and this is like an annual cycle, right? So August is kind of the month where you can say, check.
Right.
So what comes next for Photo Flood St. Louis?
Yeah. So for the next year coming up, we essentially asked our members, where would you like to go and photograph? So because our membership is so large now, and it wasn't originally, there are a lot of members that have never been to some of the neighborhoods. So it's an opportunity to revisit some of the places we've been to, as well as add a few additional outlying communities to kind of tell the fuller picture of the history of the St. Louis region.
So is that the plan then? You're going to go back, and I know downtown was first, but you'll go get that one that was second 9 years ago.
We won't follow the exact schedule over again. We'll formulate a new schedule is the plan. But this first year is definitely determined by the members.
And have you thought about how you're going to deal with the website? I mean, it's such a nice artifact of the last 9 years. Are you going to preserve it as it is in its pristine condition, or are you going to continue to add to it?
We definitely want to do some things to help try and preserve it for as long as it's feasible to do so. If Photo Flood were to someday not be a thing. But we also have an archive of over 75,000 images.
Whoa.
That's
more than just the award winners that got chosen for these narratives.
Right, exactly, yeah. So what you see on Photo Flood St. Louis on the website is actually only scratching the surface at the images that have been photographed over the time.
So what are you going to do with all that?
So we'd like to find a home for it. There are a couple of organizations around town that may be interested, but we haven't crossed that line yet. So
interesting. So you're kind of exploring. It sounds like now that you've finished the 9-year plan, there's any number of plans that could come out from this.
It's true. Yeah. We're taking. I have a bigger team that's helping me run it now. So there are other people involved that are helping me make decisions, and it's always been a collaborative process with the members, so they could tell us what they would like to see happen and where they'd like us to go and what they'd like us to do with the images.
So I imagine a number of people listening to this today are like, wow, this sounds fun. I might like to get in on this. With 600 plus members, are you still open to adding more?
Sure. Yeah. You could find us on Facebook. That's the easiest way to join up. We have a group and a public-facing page. You can email either. Get started.
Okay, so Photo Flood St. Louis, still looking for new members. I'd also be remiss if I didn't mention one cool thing that has come out of this is you actually have a gallery show coming up, and this is showing some of your work that you've shot over this 9 years?
Yeah, definitely. I think Photo Flood has made this work possible in a lot of ways because of the organizational aspects of going to all 79 neighborhoods. The work is about sort of my relationship to the city. So it's the places I've been, the places that I photographed, and where I kind of fit in the process of change that kind of underscores the city's growth. And definitely Photo Flood is a big part of getting that.
Well, so we want to encourage people to check out this show. This opens August 30th. It's called Jason Gray Mound City Chronicle. That's going to take place at the Contemporary Gallery at St. Louis Community College Forest Park. That runs through September 30th. You can get more info on that show at stlonair.show. Again, that's Jason Gray Mound City Chronicle. We also do want to encourage people, you've got to check out photofloodstl.org. If you haven't seen this yet, these photos may make you feel about St. Louis the same way Jason Gray feels about St. Louis. So, Jason Gray, founder of Photo Flood St. Louis, I want to thank you so much for joining us today and sharing about this project.
Yes, thank you.
St. Louis on the Air is a production of St. Louis Public Radio. Understanding starts here. If you learned something new from today's episode, consider leaving us a review and rating on Apple Podcasts on the App Store. It's the easiest way to help people discover our show. We appreciate it. Thank you. St. Louis Public Radio is a member-supported service of the University of Missouri, St. Louis.
Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com. Support comes from the Missouri Forest Products Association, providing more than 41,000 jobs in the production of wood pallets, railroad ties, white oak barrels, hardwood floors, and more. Details at choosewood.com.